So here's what we know of the 3 terrorists who've been neutralized by our forces in Operation Mahadev, which is, by the way, an ongoing operation right now. First, as we've just given you details of Hashim Musa Suleiman, he is a top conspirator and, in fact, someone who carried out the Pahalgam terror attack. He was also responsible previously for the Solmak tunnel attack. This was in October 2024. So after infiltrating from Pakistan into India, Musa was involved in several terror attacks on Indian soil, had actually entered into Indian soil back in 2023, and since then carried out one terror attack after another, was linked overall by agencies to 6 terror attacks, which is why this is a big operation by our forces in which Musa has been eliminated. He's been involved in several attacks and masterminding several such attacks as well. The second terrorist who the forces have identified is Abu Hamza alias Haris. Now, he is someone, we are being told, who was also involved in the Pahalgam terror attack, but not much is known of exactly which terror organization he belonged to. Those are details that our forces will release in due course of time. The third terrorist identified based on pictures again from their operation is Yasir. Now, forces have confirmed that he too was very much involved in the Pahalgam terror attack, but much like Abu Hamza, not much is known of this terrorist as well. What we do know is that all 3 were Pakistani terrorists hiding on Indian soil after going ahead and committing the Pahalgam terror attack. Let me bring in our reporters on this broadcast. We've got Ashraf Wani and Mir Farid joining us live on this broadcast. Sandeep Unitan is with me here in the studio. We also have Kamaljit Sandhu joining us from Chandigarh on exactly what this operation looked like. I'm going to bring in Mir Farid first, who was at that encounter site reporting for us the latest updates. Mir, what particularly stands out for me is that this kind of an operation was launched so close to Srinagar, which means that these terrorists were hiding very close to the capital.
Yes, in fact, I'm just outside the Dachigam National Park. This is one of the famous tourist locations of the Kashmir Valley, and a beautiful natural park which has a lot of flora and fauna. Now, of late, in fact, from the last couple of months, we are getting non-stop inputs about the fact that there were search operations, and there were moments also when some militants were tracked down. They managed to escape, but from the last at least 1 month or at least 15 to 20 days, the army had shut the national park. In fact, it was out of bound for civilians, and quite clearly it was clear that something was cooking. They had inputs about the movement of the Lashkar group in the 5-kilometer radius area inside Dachigam, and there were relentless search operations. This morning, they finally met success when this group was trapped. In fact, they were literally killed in their sleep, it seems. There were no resistance. They didn't fire back. And under a tarpaulin sheet, which they had used to basically shield themselves from the sun or probably rain, they were shot dead. A lot of arms and ammunition recovered, and also M4 carbine, which normally is a sign that's a big commander who has been caught or eliminated, because usually Jaish and Lashkar commanders carry that weapon. So this is the situation right now. Behind me, as you can see, army vehicles still going in, and the big part is the identification. Officially, nothing yet to connect it with Pahalgam, but our sources say 80 to 90% probability that one of them is connected with Pahalgam. Army had a press conference. They have postponed that, but probably in some time we'll definitely get some official response and clarity on what exactly happened, how it panned out, and how a big success it is. Back to you.
Ashraf, also at this point, as Mir pointed out, right now we're still awaiting their official briefing by the Indian Army on this particular operation. They've perhaps also pushed it because right now Operation Mahadev, as they maintain, is still underway. But of the 3 terrorists, while we have been able to confirm that Hashim Musa is a wanted LET terrorist, what about the other 2, Ashraf? Any details that are known about Yasir or about Abu Hamza?
Absolutely, Akshita. Basically, this group was at the run for last many months now after the Solmak terror attack on the under construction Morwa tunnel, which is now operational there in the Solmak. Because in that terror attack, there was a CCTV installed outside the officers' mess in that under construction tunnel where this Musa Fuji, which was commonly known as by the security agencies, was captured first time. Then that picture gave some idea about his resemblance and his look to the security agencies. And when the Pahalgam terror attack took place on 22nd of April, it was presumed, even if we reported it on the India Today on that day, that the group which is involved in the Pahalgam terror attack is the same group which has carried out the terror attack in the Solmak. Because between the Solmak and Pahalgam, Dachigam National Park comes in, it is a ridge or a terrain of a mountain range from where the terrorists could easily avoid the security vigilance, or we can say civilians even also. And walking through that ridge, one can easily reach from Solmak to Srinagar, or we can say Dachigam National Park, and then to Pahalgam. And from Pahalgam, there are limited escape routes because there is no LOC nearby. That is why the security forces focused on that mountain range only. On other one side the Pir Panchal mountain range, and on other side the Harmukh mountain range, or we can say this mountain range here in the Srinagar. So finally there was Kilu, there was human intelligence inputs with the security agencies, and to avoid that, these TRF terrorists for recent times are avoiding any kind of connectivity with the locals, with the villagers, with the people, because so that their movement could not be leaked to the security agencies. That is
don't have as much support as they used to in the valley. You know, local support is dwindling for them. They recognize that, which is why they're having to hide on their own as well. Sandeep, looking at the pictures that have emerged right now from that hideout spot, also the bodies of the neutralized terrorists, how do you really read into the manner in which they were hiding in these particular dense forests? Clearly seems like they weren't really getting any local help, were hiding out there for the last few weeks, we understand.
Well, Akshita, the fact is that these were highly trained terrorists, and the fact that Ashraf just mentioned how they trekked all the way from Pahalgam, that's almost 100 kilometers away. They trekked along the ridge lines and came here to the forest here outside of Srinagar, the Dachigam forest, which is just about 20 kilometers away from Srinagar. It's east of the Dal Lake. That tells you of the kind of training and motivation that Pakistan has been able to inculcate in these terrorists. And they're not ordinary terrorists. Like ordinary terrorists, the kind that we've seen in the valley for decades, have been the kind who don't last this long. I mean, the fact that they've been able to survive for 3 months on their own suggests that a high level of training, indoctrination. Musa was a special services group commando. This is a plausible deniable route. They say that he was an ex-commando. It's possible that he was asked to leave the SSG and then he was inducted into the TRF or the LET. You know, when it comes to bringing in a certain element of lethality and brutality in operations, the Pakistanis always seem to favor Pakistanis. Now, it's the case we've seen in the past as well with 2611. All the attackers were trained specially and they were handpicked for their brutality. The fact is that when you look into killing 20, 30 Indians in such cold blood, it's very clear that locals can never carry out this kind of operation. So this was a very, very carefully thought out and planned operation of the way that 2611 was, the way it was planned by the Pakistan military. This one as well was, you know, this three-man team that was chosen. They've been infiltrated. They've been carrying out very, very brutal attacks in the valley in the last couple of years. And the fact is that there is, of course, as you mentioned, Akshita, the possibility that they didn't trust the locals, and which is why they didn't, for reasons of operational security, did not contact locals. They were, pretty much on their own. But that's also how these special forces units operate. They're on their own. They live off the land. They carry little food, and then they hunt, they forage. Of course, investigations will show how they were able to survive in the forest. But this is how commandos are trained. They're trained to live off the land. They would have been hunting there as well, catching small animals, trapping them, eating them. And even if you see the way that the tarpaulin has been tied, Akshita, I mean, I was looking at a copy of the US Army Field Manual 90-5, which trains people how to survive in forests. It's tied exactly that way. And
The
it just
hideout
tells
spot.
you, yeah, the hideout, the way it's been tied, the way the string has been put over there, very expertly. And this is a group, mind you, that's been on the run for 3 months.
Correct.
The fact that they're able to put in, a hideout exactly the way it is in the manual tells you about the kind of training that they had. But also another point is that the way they were taken out by our special forces with minimal, it was a surgical hit. All 3 terrorists neutralized, no losses on our side. No firefight, no visible evidence of a firefight, no, trees knocked down, none of that. That suggests a surgical strike at our end, and possibly special forces on our end. We don't know exactly the full details. The briefing is yet to happen, but our special forces taking out their special forces trained terrorists.
And let's get details right now. Look, the briefing is awaited, but here's what we've picked up from our sources on how these terrorists were neutralized. How was the exact location identified? What we know is that our forces were looking out for any hint, any indication of where these terrorists were hiding for the last many months. And so they were tracking all possible communication channels. What we know from our sources is that it was through these communication devices, essentially, that our forces reached right down to the perpetrators. A Chinese satellite phone was being used. And this is something we'd confirmed right after the Pahalgam terror attack, that this was the mode of communication for these terrorists. So our forces were very clearly tracking down all signals that were coming in from these Chinese satellite phones. One was found active on July 11th, a few weeks ago. And then they got in further intel from nomads in the area who confirmed that they did see some suspicious movement of terrorists in that forested area. And so again, while our forces were closely watching out in this particular location, they got another ping essentially of a Chinese satellite phone being used, found active recently in that very location. So immediately our forces went in for the kill. A cordon was laid in the entire area. The 3 terrorists were spotted. These terrorists were sleeping. They had no idea that their location had been zeroed in on by our forces. So our forces very stealthily went right in and fired at the terrorists. Now, the terrorists were essentially in one location. They kept moving around, but it was when they were in one location with that tarpaulin sheet above them that they were neutralized. Kamaljeet has those details for us. Kamaljeet, clearly looking at the details that had come in, our forces had pinpoint details of exactly where they were. And that's no small feat. You know, for everyone saying, look, it's taken 97 days, it's important to highlight how challenging it is to find 3 to 4 of these terrorists holed up in some corner of the valley.
Well, it's taken over 3 months for security forces to get to the perpetrators of Pahalgam. But let me tell you, as far as the operation itself is concerned, remember, it was kilometers and kilometers of cordon in South Kashmir. But the first hint came in on July 11th, as you're mentioning it. That's where there was a communication which was on in July 11th in Dachigam. And then thereafter, once the cordon and search operations were carried out, Jammu Kashmir Police, the CRPF, the others, they all participated. Thereafter, what we saw was another communication which was made just 2 days ago. That finally led to security grid believing these are still boxed in right in Dachigam. The nomads also confirmed that there was a movement of terrorists. They were identified as foreign terrorists. They were identified as 3. They were also identified as Lashkar-e-Taiba group. And this is where it became that there's a high probability that these terrorists are the ones who could be the perpetrators. And that is where a chance encounter took place. Luckily for 4 paras which had been scouting that area, they have stealth mode precision training, and they spotted this tarpaulin, and that's where they saw that these terrorists were in resting mode and they were carrying weapons. They were in unlock mode. So that is where these terrorists were prepared, but they were relaxing, and that is why they were shot and neutralized even before they could actually lay their hands onto their own weapons to retaliate. The other part is obviously about the sort of weapons they were carrying. They were carrying food material. So this is what is going to be important, is the survival toolkit of these particular terrorists who continue to move within the forest, continue to survive on their own without reaching out to local population. But yes, a verification being done by Jammu Kashmir Police, a double verification if it is required, because there is a resemblance to photographs. So they do believe they could be possibly the terrorists, and that's a high probability chance. And then thereafter, a final official confirmation information before the world is told who these terrorists are. But at this point
So
of
we're
time,
still
a clear
awaiting details
indication
of
that
exactly
this is linked
when
to
we can
national
expect
terror
that formal press release from the army. But for obvious reasons, as Kamaljeet put, so there will be a double verification. This is a joint operation by the army, the CRPF and the Jammu and Kashmir police. Let's